John in Davidson, North Carolina. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how are you? I was on hold. I was going to ask the senator this question. It was about Social Security. It could be argued that it's morphed to something that really wasn't intended when it was first started in the 40s.
It was started in 1935.
As far as with the actual, it was created, but I think the first payout or the first person to collect a check was somewhere a few years after that. Right?
1936.
Full Social Security benefits started at 65, and the life expectancy back then was 63. So clearly, it's people are living longer.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong, John. The only people who are living longer right now, first of all, if you take infant mortality, in 1935, we had not yet developed penicillin. I mean, that came out of World War II. We had the sulfa drugs from World War I. And so a lot of children died in their first 5 years. They died from infections, typically. You had a lot of women who died in childbirth. You had children who died at a young age. If you strip infant mortality out of life expectancy figures, the average working person, the men, if you would just look at men who are who have middle-class men, working-class men, the life expectancy in 1935 and the life expectancy today is nearly identical. The group that is living older is the top 10% of income earners. The top 10% of income earners are living about a year and a half longer, but working-class men are living about the same as they were in 1935. It's a canard. It's one of the lies that Pete Peterson and his bunch have been pushing because they include those infant mortality statistics, which have nothing to do with Social Security. Infants who die at the age of a year or 3 weeks from a childbirth infection never pay into Social Security, never take money out of Social Security, but they do drag down the overall life expectancy rates, and they do so significantly because they're losing an entire 70 years.
Okay, I mean, point well taken. But my question to him was, or would be, how much stress on the system is the future payments of somebody, say, 45 or younger? In other words, the country did fine before Social Security was around.
No, it didn't.
Just phase it out.
The country was doing very badly, John, before 1935. You had more than half of all people over 65, first of all, in 1935, were living in poverty, and Social Security cut that down into the high teens, low 20s in terms of percentage. Right now, it's below 15%, I believe, as a result of Social Security. And if you did away with Social Security altogether, it would pop back up into the mid 30% range. So, number one, no, the country wasn't doing well. And secondly, and I think probably the most important thing, is that 1/3 of all Social Security payments do not go to people over 65. They literally go to people like my niece, who was born with spina bifida, or bifida, however you say it, and profoundly retarded, never learned how to speak. She lived until she was about 20 years old. I guess she's the daughter of my cousin. So yeah, she's my niece. So and my cousin and her husband had to quit his job to care for her. They couldn't afford to hire somebody to care for her. Social Security filled in the chinks there for them, and Social Security paid for many of her health expenses. So without Social Security, she would have been dead, and my cousin and her husband would have been destitute. One of my best friends, Michael Hutchison, who's more or less my age, he's a little bit younger than me, a couple of years younger than me. Back almost 20 years ago, he was running in Santa Fe in the winter. He was he was one of these guys who runs 4 or 5 miles every morning just to keep in shape. He was running in the dark in the morning, crossing a bridge with a fairly low guardrail, hit a patch of ice, flipped off the bridge, cracked through the ice, hit his head against the rocks, broke his neck. He's been paralyzed from the neck down ever since, and he's living on Social Security. And without Social Security, Michael would be dead now. And as it is, I mean, he's basically destitute. Social Security does not provide much, but 1/3 of all Social Security payments go to people like them or like Paul Ryan. When Paul Ryan's dad died, his family qualified for Social Security, and the widow, orphan, and survivors benefits. That's 1/3 of the payments. Social Security is an essential part of the fabric of America, John, and it's a program that's not in trouble, by the way. Thank you very much. Still there?
All great points. I think that should be the platform of some of the Democrats.
It is
addressing those points because they're all valid points, but I hear them from you, but I don't hear them from too many folks in Washington.
Well, one of the problems is that there's so much money being spread around this town. I mean, Pete Peterson himself is estimated to spend more than $400 million. He pledged publicly that he would spend over $1 billion. If you go to petersonpyramid.org, you can check this out. In order to privatize Social Security. Social Security is sitting on a $2.7 trillion trust fund, a surplus, because Reagan saw the boomers coming, and this was one of the good things that Ronald Reagan did. One of the two good things that I regularly honor him for on this show. One, he made Social Security solvent, even though there's this huge bulge coming through the rabbit through the python of the baby boomers, and he said, okay, we're going to have one generation that is not only going to pay for their parents, which is how Social Security worked before 1982. In other words, working people paid in. There was no Social Security trust fund at all. Social Security zeroed out at the end of every year. People paid in, and retired people took benefits. And he said, when the boomers start retiring, you're going to see that ratio of 5, 10, 15 people working for every retiree. It's going to drop down to 2, 3, 4, 5 people working for every retiree. There's no way we can afford to run the program that way. So one generation, the baby boomers, are going to be double taxed. They're not only going to pay for their parents' retirement, but they're going to pay for their own as well in advance. And so starting in 1982 and ending around 2030 or 2028 or something like that, Reagan doubled the Social Security tax. I mean, literally doubled it. And the surplus, which was the boomers saving up for their own retirement, was put into the Social Security Trust Fund, which hits a peak of $2.7 trillion, which is where it's at right now. It was supposed to hit that peak. And then over the next 30 years, as the boomers die out, gets paid down to zero, which it's supposed to. And you hear these Peterson front guys going, oh, my God, the Social Security Trust Fund, it's starting to run out of money. We're going to be paying out of the Social Security Trust Fund pretty soon. Within 30 years, it'll be at zero. That's how it's supposed to work. That's the savings account for this one bulge, that generational bulge. And it's Social Security is just fine, and with a very small tweak. I mean, these conservatives say, why don't we have a flat tax? Why shouldn't a billionaire pay the exact same tax rate as somebody working at McDonald's? Let's just 17% for everybody. Well, Social Security is arguably a flat tax, except Social Security, you pay, what is it, 4.2% or whatever it is on the first $113,000 that you earn, and then after that, you don't pay a penny. How is that a flat tax? That makes no sense at all. So right now, Social Security is solvent for the next 27 years. Next 27 years. And then after that, it can pay out 80% of benefits forever. If we simply raised that $113,000 cap to a $500,000 cap, it would be solvent forever. And in fact, there'd be enough of a surplus that we could cut Social Security's tax rate by 2%, or we could fund about a third of Medicare. Or if we did away with the cap altogether and said, the billionaires who are running Facebook and Microsoft and ExxonMobil and, Stephen Hemsley over at United Healthcare making $1 billion running a health insurance company, they have to pay on every penny of their income, they have to pay Social Security tax as well. The program would be so incredibly solvent that you could cut in half the tax rate on average working people and everybody else, and the billionaires as well, and it would be solvent forever. I mean, this program has no problem. The crisis is a manufactured crisis by billionaires who want to move that money out of government keep and into Wall Street so that Wall Street can get their grubby little hands on $2.7 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund. Because Wall Street will skim 15-20% off the top the same way the health insurance companies do.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And it's tragic that that's not a conversation that you hear in the mainstream corporate media, because that's not what the talking point. There's nobody has a self-interest in sharing the truth with you like I just did.